Welcome to the CTO Studio. This week we talk to someone who has live coded on a seismic vessel. Imagine being on a boat and coding the Unix in the cron jobs. Kimeshan Naidoo, next.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Kimeshan Naidoo? Is that the right pronunciation?
It's about 90% right. It's Kimeshan Naidoo. Yeah.
Kimeshan?
Yeah.
Kimeshan?
Yeah, so like the A is like an I in the end.
Oh, Kimeshan.
Yeah.
So what do your parents call you when as a term of endearment?
Probably Kimmy.
Kimmy
is the most.
But I can see on your face you don't.
No,
like,
I like my full name.
And so do your colleagues call you Kimeshan?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you flew in from the UK, especially for this podcast. Thank you, man.
And the conference.
Let the record show that CTO Studio is attracting guests from around the world.
Yeah. 11-hour straight flight,
dude,
just for the podcast.
One of the things I don't want is I want to stay away from Skype interviews as long as I possibly can. I just feel like I get tired when I'm listening to it. The fatigue on my ears just gets exhausting.
Yeah.
In person, I feel like there's a dynamic that works.
Definitely.
So thanks for flying in.
Anytime.
Tell me about Unibuddy.
Yeah, so Unibody is a edtech startup. It's about 3 years old now, and we develop a platform for universities and colleges. So it's a software application that's embedded on the university's website, and it allows prospective applicants to have an online chat with current students at the university. So for universities, it's an engagement tool, it's a recruiting tool, and they pay an annual subscription for the product.
And do you not take a cut from the fee when they close, when a student joins?
So that's definitely a potential additional revenue stream once we can better track when we affect the conversion and when we basically increase conversions for universities. But right now that's a bit tricky. So it's a fixed annual subscription. It's free for applicants, however many use the platform.
So I guess what you're saying is the premise is that university enrollments are higher or better when an existing student is engaging with a prospective student.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you email the university at admissions at whatever university, you might get a response in a couple of weeks because they get thousands of emails. And also, you want to ask the question to someone that's on the ground, that's in the position that you're in, that's studying what you're about to study. So you're getting real-time information from the people that actually have done what you want to do.
Do you incentivize students to answer prospective students?
We don't. So universities already have student ambassadors. They use them for things like open days, etc., career fairs. So we're basically bringing them online. We're saying, take your ambassadors, put them on your platform and use them to engage your prospects.
And there is obviously some sort of payment arrangement between the university and their ambassadors.
Yeah, so they get paid based on the time they spend helping out in the same way they would get paid to be at an open day.
Oh, so you're measuring the time that they spend?
Yeah, so we can measure the time that they spend chatting or writing blog posts or doing any activity on the platform.
So Unibody includes blogging as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So students can write blogs. And
Did
that's
you?
public.
So you're the CTO of Unibody, and
Yeah.
you guys are based in London.
Yes.
And are you using? Is all the dev happening there, or are you outsourcing?
So we have right now all of our engineering and business in London in our office. So we're about 18 at the moment, half tech and half business / sales. So yes, nothing's outsourced. We keep all of our talent in London, and that's been working really well for us. Having everyone in the same office and being able to work closely together. As we grow, though, we would look at opening up engineering teams in other countries as well to scale better.
And is the ambassador model, ambassador conversational model, something that scales beyond the UK? I mean, do you have American universities as well?
Yeah. So right now we have 71 universities across 10 different countries. Most of the countries are in Europe, but outside of Europe, it would be Australia, which is quite a good market for us, and the US, which has been growing the fastest out of any country in the last 3 months.
And you probably have tens of thousands of universities, right?
That
you can scale to.
Yeah, exactly. There's about over 3,000 in Europe, over 3,000 in the US alone. So, yeah.
Do you have any Ivy League schools on there yet?
We're speaking to a few Ivy Leagues, but right now we have about 11 universities in the US that have been onboarded and have signed contracts.
And so tell me a little bit about the urgent versus important framework that you use.
Yeah, so this is just a prioritization framework that I find helps me a lot in terms of being able to know that I'm focusing on the right things. Because everyone has a to-do list and everyone has a long to-do list that keeps growing. And sometimes you can go through a whole day just doing stuff on your to-do list, and at the end of the day, it's like, did I make any progress towards the goals that are important to me, or did I just create busy work? Did I just make myself busy and tick off items that aren't really important? So urgent versus important is basically asking myself a question: is this task important? So does it actually push me forward towards my goal, or is it just urgent and it's something that's come up and it feels urgent and it distracts you? Because something can be important but not urgent, or it can be urgent but not important. But you want to focus on what's important and urgent.
Yeah,
ideally.
so you can't, because something can't be important and not important.
Yeah, that too.
So so how do you find that I think that the urgent versus important, when you're managing it inside of yourself, is, I think one can kind of decide what it is, but like you mentioned, everyone has their own lists. How do you manage it when the CEO thinks something is urgent? How do you coach them that it's not necessarily important?
Yeah, so I think a really good example of this has been in the past. Whenever a university would come onto our landing page, and we have like a little intercom chat where they can chat with us, they would speak to us and be like, "Oh, we want this feature," and then we'd sort of react and be like, "Okay, yeah, we need to build this feature." And that's an example of like doing something that feels urgent because the customer is asking for it and they're paying you a lot of money and you want to make them happy. But is it important? Does it align with your long-term vision? Does it align with your roadmap? Does it align with where you want to see the product go? And it's very easy to like pick up all the stuff that comes up, urgent stuff, and then after the end of the quarter, you're like, did we actually build what was on the roadmap? Or did we get distracted with all the small stuff? So yeah, that's where I find it helps a lot.
And I'm assuming with your CEO regularly syncing up on important versus urgent.
Yes, exactly.
Because I know as a startup, you're chasing the money, and I know as the CEO, you're probably, everything is always urgent and important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it is very much a negotiation, and it's constantly trying to get better at that.
Are you still coding?
Yeah.
What stack did you guys do all of this in?
So the backend's Python, and the front end, all of our client apps is React.
Python backend.
Yeah. We use the interesting part of our API is it's not a REST API, but it's GraphQL. So it's a Flask app, but using a GraphQL API.
And what does GraphQL give you? What made you choose that as opposed to REST?
So GraphQL is a technology developed by Facebook to make data fetching from the client side much more efficient than a REST API. So essentially what it allows you to do is shape the data that you want from the client side, instead of the other way around where you call an endpoint and the endpoint decides what to give you in response. So with GraphQL, we can basically use the same endpoint and request different fields or different data from the front end without changing anything in the endpoint. So it's allowed us to move really fast to grow the platform, to grow the back end, and to maintain quite a high velocity.
Yeah, I haven't. So I know many CTOs who, for them, GraphQL is sort of their go-to storage. Whereas for me, I'm still sort of in the MySQL Postgres world. And then, so is Python as a backend? I'm assuming you have a lot of devs. I haven't heard many people using Python as a
as the sole language in the backend. So one of the nice things about Python is it's quite an elegant language. It's very easy to maintain compared to say Java or Node, which is JavaScript. So we find it's quite easy to maintain using the backend talent that we have. But everyone on the team is a full stack developer, so they work on the Python and the React.
Yeah, I mean Python is, as a system language with NumPy and SciPy, all that stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess the Flask accessing, GraphQL isn't something I've heard of. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, the issue we run into with Python is that it is a synchronous language. So doing asynchronous work is quite is not as a great experience as it would be on Node or Go. So the architecture we're moving towards is away from a Python monolith, but into breaking our services down into microservices that can be done in different languages depending on what fits best the service. So yeah, we will be introducing Go into the backend because Go is a great language in terms of it's really clean, and you've also got the power of the async as well.
So we have this constant battle as startup CTOs around our time management. And if you poll, the whole of 7 CTOs, I think 60-70% have a real problem with managing their own time. And I think especially for people who are still contributing code, having to be tactical implementation all the way up to strategic and be available for the business. How are you managing that?
So, yeah, definitely haven't figured it out yet. It's a process.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of time blocks, right? Where you is it where you block? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. So what I find is previously when I was focusing on building things and coding, there would be a lot of interruptions. So someone from business or product would come and ask me a question or like want to discuss something, and I found that I wasn't really productive with getting features deployed as an individual. So by setting aside a time block, like a no disturb time, say between 10 and 12, every day. Basically, everyone's aware that they can't disturb me in that time, and I can focus and get into flow for those few hours and get some like really good productive work done.
And is that productive work generally coding?
Yes. Yeah. Anything that involves flow. So coding, doing a design, brainstorming something.
Yeah. And then does your CEO comply?
Yeah, I mean everyone's pretty good on the business team as long as it's communicated well. It's in the so we use like Google Calendar for everything. So everyone can see everyone's Google Calendar, and if it's there, people know and are aware of it.
So last night we hung out a little bit, and you kind of gave us this little story around the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting adventure for a few years. So when I graduated, I did a bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering back in South Africa, in Cape Town, and my first job that I took was at Schlumberger, which is an oil and gas services company. So that sounded really exciting to me because it was a very different industry that I knew nothing about, and I wanted to apply the engineering knowledge I've gained to something completely new. So for 3 years, I essentially lived on a seismic exploration vessel, basically a ship.
You lived on it?
Yeah, so not 3 years consecutively. It's done on rotation. So you're in the ship for like 6 weeks, and then you're on holiday for like 4 weeks.
And the ship, it's not the rig, right?
No, because the rigs are in one place in the water, and they're installed there.
And the ship goes between them, or?
Yeah, the ship is the phase before you found oil.
Oh, okay.
Because the rigs means you've already found oil and you're in production and you're drilling and extracting the oil. But there's a phase before that where you need to figure out where in the ocean there is hydrocarbon reserves. And you have a seismic vessel that goes out and does a survey using a technology that can be best described as sonar. So you're shooting a sound wave into the bottom of the ocean. You have recorders being dragged by the ship that record the bounced sound wave. And by taking this data and processing it, you can build a picture of what's beneath the ocean. And identify what's rock, what's oil, what's gas.
And aren't you pissing off the whales?
There is some controversy about it, but essentially you have, for example, a marine mammal observer on board, whose job is to make sure that anywhere in the vicinity, a radius of like 10 kilometers, there's no big mammals that we're interfering with.
Wow. Are you told to say that, or did that actually happen?
They were on board. When I was on board, they were. It depends on the country, though. Some countries don't have that regulation.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so, you were able to live on these ships
after some getting used to, because if you've ever been on a ship for a long time, seasickness will kick in.
Regardless.
Yeah.
And how did you manage that, man?
It was just, they have like tablets and ear patches and all these things. I don't think they help. I think you just gotta like live through it. And it feels like your stomach's constantly being turned 180 degrees, and you can't get off the ship, so you just gotta have to, and you basically live on dry toast because you can't feel like eating anything. Yeah, for about 2 days, and after that your body becomes used to the motion of the ship, and you start.
So did you know every time when you were done with your 4 weeks and you went back on the ship, did you know you were going to get seasick? Or does that sort of eventually stop?
No, it doesn't happen every trip. It's only the first trip.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it also, I guess it depends on the ocean, like the storm.
Yes, exactly.
Have you ever gone through bad storms?
Not as bad as some of the other crews. The worst I had was about 7-meter swells in the North Sea. So 7 meter, how many feet is that for the US? It's about
I don't know. What's 7 times 3-ish?
Yeah, about 21 feet.
That's terrible.
Yeah. You feel the whole boat being rocked, and the tables in, for example, the mess room will be sliding, and your plate will be sliding across.
Did you feel? Did you feel in some ways that you were that the boat might capsize? Do you never feel that?
It feels that you're being swung quite far to one direction, but it never feels like that it's entirely going to capsize. Okay. Yeah.
And so, why did you have to be on the ship? Why couldn't you just code and send code?
Yeah. So, firstly, because you're collecting quite sensitive data. It's basically the location of hydrocarbon reserves.
Okay. So they didn't want to. They wanted that to stay on that information to stay on the ship.
So the data is on the ship. It's still using quite old school technologies. It's recorded on magnetic tapes, the data, and they will actually pack those, box them, and ship those to an office for further processing. But the handling of that data is very, very regulated and under like heavy security.
And your job on those boats were to what?
So I was essentially involved in the acquiring of the data through the recording equipment and the data capturing equipment.
And is that like CSV files?
So what I spent a lot of time doing was automating the start of job and end of job tasks, because this was a checklist of things that had to be done.
Cron jobs. Cron job?
Yes. So pretty much like a cron job. So you had to basically save the data into a file and then FTP the file to multiple different locations. On
the ship though.
Yes. Yeah, so I wrote some bash scripts that essentially automated things like the FTP over secure connection, and organizing the data and processing the data.
Yeah, I also did that a lot, processing EDI purchase data. But that's pretty ballsy. So, did you guys find any oil reserves?
Yes. in the Persian Gulf, and that's all the information I can give.
Can you give me the lat longs and then I can finish that job? Okay, so then from there, did you then end up in the UK?
Yeah, so after 3 years, I found that I wasn't learning as much new stuff as I started. And I quit and I started a master's in computer science in London. Yeah.
And what did you do your master's in?
It was specialized in software engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have some strong feelings about sort of regulation of software engineering, right?
Yes, well, I have some opinions about how the software engineering industry is evolving.
Tell me that.
So if you think about traditional industries like construction or architecture, civil engineering, electrical engineering, they're very well regulated. So if you wanted to build a house, you would have to have a civil engineer or an architect that's licensed and has been that has passed basically a board exam or has all the requirements to be able to do this. Same for electrical engineer. If you want to change the electricity structures in your house, you'd have electrical engineer or electrician that has been regulated, and they know what they're doing. Whereas when we build software, which is just as important as electricity or construction, because people use software for very, very important uses, and sometimes you depend on it without even realizing it. But yet we don't have that sort of regulation in the software industry. Anyone can build anything, launch it on GitHub. Someone can fork that and build on top of it. But you might be building it on top of a platform that isn't good, for example. And there's pros and cons to that, because it's one of the reasons why tech moves so quickly, because we don't regulate it. Because you don't have to pass some board exam in order to launch this product. But it also means that we could be building things on unstable or a bit shaky foundations.
Or abandoned projects.
Yes, abandoned projects. And I think the main issue is that we also don't necessarily build on previous knowledge, because a lot of the time you get new people coming in and they're like, I don't like this, I'm going to create a new language. And if you look back 20 years ago, someone pretty much worked on that and we just didn't, people aren't just aware of it, or they didn't study it. So we tend to reinvent the wheel a lot because of the fact that we aren't necessarily forced to study everything that's gone before and build on top of that in a way.
So you're saying some sort of certification or some sort of pragmatism around libraries and tools that are out there, and then that you can be certified in that.
Yes, I think certain libraries and tools that are being used by thousands of projects, hundreds of thousands of projects, it would be much more comforting to know that they've undergone certain test or gone through some quality control, that we know they're going to be maintained, they're not going to break. Some random person isn't just going to come in and change it and it breaks for everyone else.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I wonder what impact that would have on just innovation.
Yeah, so that would be the double-edged sword, because it would definitely slow things down.
It's almost like you want to have a quality control of open source projects.
Yeah, especially projects that are in use by thousands of other projects.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a different dynamic that starts kicking in. That when you have more than, like I know in the US, when you have more than 50 employees, there are certain rules that kick in that the state holds you accountable for.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, but for open source projects.
Yes, in a way. Because, for example, React was developed by Facebook. And I believe now it's open source.
But there was that scare, right?
Yeah, but if they just decided to shut it down or stop maintaining it, or the group running the open source, made a huge error, that would affect tens of thousands of companies who are developing their applications in React.
And it's almost like you're saying.
So we're giving all that responsibility to Facebook or this small group of people running this open source project when it's affecting millions of people.
Yeah, no, that's definitely food for thought. Huh. It makes me feel happy and sad at the same time. Because you don't want. I mean, so when I look at GitHub projects, I think I was looking at a Golang library for Twilio the other day, and there isn't, well, maybe there is, but I didn't know whether there's it's almost like you want a directory of, well, these libraries are still good, these libraries are
maintained,
these are or these have been abandoned. Now you can easily see that in sort of the issues list, and you can see it in the last commits and stuff, But just because a project hasn't been committed to for 2-3 years doesn't mean that it might just be done.
Yeah, there's no more bugs.
Yeah, and it's just like, especially if it's a small tools scope, and it was built to do one specific thing. You might just be using it like crazy and not needing maintenance. In fact, you don't want that maintenance because you don't want it to break. So it's I think Ruby has Ruby Gems, which I think was an attempt. I don't know if it's still around, but it was an attempt to sort of help people when they do want to evaluate gems, to kind of have a look at what the state was of each of those gems.
Yes.
Flasks for Python.
Okay.
Or no, what Python calls them eggs, right?
Python.
What are packages in Python called?
We generally use the pip package manager.
So do you install a pip?
No, most people just say packages.
Packages, okay. Gems are just beautiful.
Yeah, it's an awesome.
So speaking of sort of open source tools, Linus Torvalds, one of your role model heroes.
Yes, well, I don't think I necessarily agree with the way that he manages people, because he's notorious for being quite
blunt.
Yeah, blunt, direct, and really aggressive in the way he pushes people. Though in terms of influence on software engineering, I struggle to think of anyone that has had anywhere close to the amount of influence. Because if you think of Git and Linux, these two tools, if you take them away, it completely changes what you think of as the software engineering. Like, everyone uses Git for version control. Yes, there are a few competitors, but it's pretty much the standard now.
Yeah. But that's an example. So is he still the single point of for the kernel patches?
For Linux, he does the releases, he reviews the code, he manages that.
So that's an example of the fate of the Linux kernel being in one person's hands.
Yes, in a way, he's sort of the regulatory body.
So for you, that would be an example of a good thing. One guy is the QA.
There are advantages to having one guy who's there for a long time, because he knows the project like the back of his hand.
I wonder if he still reads patch files in his emails.
Oh, did he say he does that?
I think I saw an interview with him once, and he goes through the pull requests
in the email.
Wow. He reads the code in the email. Okay. That was many years ago. I don't know if that's changed.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great. Any books that you're into, or anything you want to leave us with as far as what you love and what you can recommend for people out there?
Books, my favorite author, non-fiction wise, would be Tim Ferriss. Yeah, I really love Tim Ferriss's books, and the great thing about it, he covers pretty much anything. So I think it applies to everyone, whatever you're looking to do in a better way, or think about in a different way, or be able to do it much quicker than most people think you can do them. Tim Ferriss is a great resource because he kind of finds a way to hack everything.
I think his 4-hour work week was, I think I read that in one sitting. Yeah. First time in my life where I started the book and I finished the book. I think it was on 2 flights, and I was in a plane, and I just finished the book.
Yeah, amazing.
Blew my mind.
Yeah.
Well, Kimeshan? You messed up my pronunciation.
Kimeshan,
sorry. Thanks for being with us, man.
Always a pleasure.
See you soon.
Yes.
Cheers.
You too.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the CTOstudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.